You good?
Yeah, I Amy. What's the video called?
It's a Nick Crowley video. I just put reacting to Nick Crowley with the bro, or Nick Crowley reaction with the bro, or something like that. What's up, y'all? We
How you
on.
spell Crowley?
Uh, I think I spelled it right. It's Crowley. So
Okay, hopefully that's right.
hopefully,
I appreciate you, mama.
you good. All right. Oh, by the way, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the stream, man. You feel me? Well, I'm here with my boy KJ. We doing a late night stream. We reacting to
Yes, sir.
the homie Nick Crowley, man. You feel me? He released new shit. We out. We on that shit.
Yes, sir. Oh shit, mama. What's up, guys? It's your boy Kenny X3, and as you can see, me and my boy Dalton, our DJ Boss 5611. We're gonna be reacting to Nick Crowley's some scary shit. So hey, buckle in and let's get ready.
Oh yeah. All right. Let me see. All right. Let me know if that shit's full screen for you as well, my guy.
Hold on.
And make sure the volume is good and everything. Okay, looks good.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. 3, 2, 1, go.
It appeared totally innocent. In a small room somewhere in the Kohistan region of Pakistan, 4 women sat on the floor, each clapping their hands and singing a traditional Kohistani song. With them were 2 men, one seen dancing beside them, and another seen recording the moment on a grainy video taken on his old cell phone. The footage captured the impromptu after-party of a wedding that the women and men had separately attended earlier that day, an event that transpired sometime in May 2010. Shortly after this recording ended, the group dispersed, and each person returned to their respective homes, where the celebration eventually became a distant memory, their lives continuing on as if it had never even happened. At least for a time.
Damn.
Approximately 2 years later, the whereabouts and safety of every individual shown in this video would be called into question, following a disturbing admission from a Kohistani local. An admission that began a multi-long-year search for answers to a conspiracy that traced back to the very moment this recording began.
Damn.
A moment that may have ultimately sealed the fate of 9 individuals, in what has since become known as the 2012 Kohistan video incident.
Okay. Internet's deadliest video.
I'd be willing to bet that many of you have a massive to-do list that only seems
Shout out to my boy Nick, man.
Yeah, you feel me? Most replayed. This shit is most
Jump. It didn't say jump. Well, it said in the corner. It said jump something.
Nah, I already did. It's the most replayed too. Shit for a reason.
This is Nick Crowley.
On June 4th, 2012, a press conference was held in the city of Abbottabad, Pakistan. The speaker, a man named Afzal Kohistani, made the long trek from his home in Kohistan, high in the mountains, to spread the word of a horrific incident that had occurred in the previous days. And he didn't just have a story to tell, but he also had a video to share. With him was that grainy cell phone recording taken 2 years earlier, showing the group of 4 women and 2 men dancing after a local wedding ceremony. And while the footage itself was far from alarming, it was the context that Afzal gave it that would eventually capture the world's attention. As according to the man, each of the women shown within this video had suffered a terrible fate, and it was all due to the existence of the footage itself. For years, the video had been lost on one of the men's phones, buried in a sea of other media, and destined to be seen only by his eyes. But fate had different plans, as for unknown reasons, in May of 2012, that footage leaked online. there it went unnoticed by most of the world, as in all honesty, the video itself just isn't that interesting. But in Kohistan, where it was filmed, it went completely viral. It was shared from villager to villager until practically the entire region had seen it, with it becoming a point of discussion for most. As for locals of that area, this video was far from normal. In fact, for many, it actually depicted evidence of a crime.
What?
Kohistan is a region bound by its traditions. For centuries, they've tried to preserve their culture and way of life. So much so that any breaches of said traditions are taken so seriously that they're viewed as legal matters. And in this footage, the women could be seen breaking several of them.
What?
For starters, women in Kohistan are not allowed to congregate with men from outside of their families. Doing so is blatantly illegal, and in this video, the women and men have no relation. On top of that, they're also from different villages, which is another infraction. But perhaps the biggest crime committed in this clip was that the women were clapping and singing in the presence of these men, despite the area having strict rules against dancing with members of the opposite sex.
What?
As a result, when this footage was passed around, it was actually viewed as evidence of crimes committed against Kohistani tradition, and it was taken very seriously. Now, despite being part of Pakistan and falling under its laws, Kohistan is unique in the sense that geographically it's next to impossible to effectively govern. It's nestled in the intersection of 3 major mountain ranges, making accessing it very difficult, and enforcing the country's laws next to impossible, as the area practically lives in its own isolation. Instead, the region is composed of largely self-governing villages who have their own sets of rules that they play by, and when a crime is alleged, they'll hold something called a jirga, which is essentially a tribal council comprised of village elders who determine if the party or parties are guilty and what their punishment should be. And oftentimes, these punishments will be most harsh when the crimes committed go against their tradition. And this video allegedly did just that. And so, soon after its release, a jirga was held, and discussions about what should be done to these women began. The story that Afzal was sharing so far was one that wouldn't have been shocking to many, as this had just become protocol for villages like Kohistan. But what was shocking was the punishment that these women allegedly received. According to Afzal, once the footage was made public, all 4 of the women shown within the video, along with one other girl who wasn't pictured but had allegedly helped coordinate this gathering, had been rounded up and thrown inside a small room about the size of a closet that served as a makeshift prison. And inside, each day was misery. Every morning, the door would be opened and each woman would be doused with boiling water, causing their skin to bubble and blister. At night, the door would open again, and this time, the women would be covered in burning hot embers and coal from the day's fire. They were tortured in unimaginable ways, until finally, on May 30th, 2012, when at 2 in the morning, the jirga gave the final verdict that all of the women should be executed.
Damn.
The door opened one final time that morning at 2 a.m., and one by one, the women were woken up, restrained, and their throats were cut. This was an appalling claim by Afzal. If true, what they did to these women was not only outrageously extreme considering the crime, but also very illegal, as jirgas didn't have the right to sentence someone to death. And because of this, those watching the press conference were left horrified. Honor killings aren't necessarily a new thing in Pakistan, especially in remote villages, but this level of sadism was unimaginable, and all for a blatantly harmless gathering. And yet Afzal claimed that not only had no one in Kohistan opposed the jirga's shocking decision, but even the family members of these women supported it. And they supported it so much so that they were the ones who carried out the torture and the eventual killings.
What?
Their fathers, uncles, brothers all partook in scalding them with water, burning them with embers, and cutting their throats. And no one tried to stop it, except for Afzal. He had caught wind of the girls' torture while it was happening, and actively tried to intervene by alerting Kohistani journalists, though when this failed and they went through with the executions, he left the region to alert the government of Pakistan and the rest of the world to the atrocity that had happened in Kohistan. But for Afzal, this wasn't just about avenging the deaths of these girls, as he had another very important reason for speaking out. As shown in this footage, were Afzal's 2 brothers, whose involvement, he claimed, had also led to them receiving death sentences, with both brothers going into hiding in order to avoid being killed. This press conference was essentially Afzal's way of trying to save his brothers, as he knew that they could be found and killed at any moment, spurring Afzal to act, even at the risk of his own safety, as locals had caught wind of his previous attempts to speak with journalists, and in response, that same Jirga that had sentenced these women to death had sent an angry mob of 40 to 50 men to Afzal's home in order to silence him, likely not wanting news of their illegal sentencing to leave the region. And after giving this speech, Afzal knew that that group was only going to become more angry. Based on Afzal's testimony, the existence of this video had caused the torture and deaths of 5 women, dead at the hands of a radical Jirga and the victim's own family, who were now coming after Afzal and his 2 brothers. As if this footage had just been kept on that man's phone, no one would have even known that this meeting had ever took place, and therefore none of this would be happening. It's an almost fantastical story, which begs the question, was any of it actually true?
Women in Pakistan's Kohistan who were allegedly singing and dancing with men at a wedding party were killed after a tribal Jirga committee of elders ordered their execution.
Why would they record this video?
Afzal's story immediately made the front page news in Pakistan, but it wasn't without its controversy. At the end of the day, a story is all it was. He had no semblance of proof to back up his claims. In fact, Afzal himself never actually witnessed the crimes that he spoke of. He had simply been told about them by others who had, leaving the public perception to his story mixed. Within hours of his press conference, Maulana Javeed, the leader of the Jirga that Afzal was trying to expose, came forward to publicly disavow the allegations, saying that Afzal had made up this entire story in an attempt to get political asylum to the United States for both him and his brothers, and that the women in this video were completely fine, living their lives as normal in Kohistan. Both sides made their claims, but both sides offered no evidence, turning the story into a confusing case of he said, they said. Luckily though, the government of Pakistan had the perfect idea to get to the bottom of it, and so they reached out to Maulana Javeed and told him that if the girls were alive like he claimed, then he must bring them to the courtroom in Abbottabad as proof. It was a great idea, in theory, but ultimately the Jirga hit back on this, claiming that it would be dishonorable for these women to appear in court, as women in Kohistan aren't even meant to leave their homes under most circumstances, let alone travel that far and be shown in a public forum.
आपने उनमें से उनको फिर क्यों कल सुप्रीम कोर्ट में नहीं पेश कर रहे हैं? वो तो हमारे क्योंकि रिवायात ये तारीख में कभी इस तरह के कोई वाक़या नहीं हुआ है कि कोहिस्तानी रिवायात में लड़कियों को अदालत में कचहरियों में पेश करना, ये तो वो मजबूरी है। ये बताइए वो खवातीन जिंदा है या मर गई? वो तो हमारे इल्म में जिंदा है।
Kohistan is one of the most socially conservative areas on the planet. It is a deeply patriarchal society, with women having severe restrictions on all aspects of their lives, especially when it comes to social engagement, making this the perfect out for the Jirga. And so the government came up with a different solution. If the women couldn't travel to the courtroom, then they would travel to them. And so they quickly got together a group of investigators and sent them up into the mountains to meet the girls there themselves, and hopefully confirm that they were in fact still alive. On June 6, 2012, a helicopter carrying this newly formed investigative team landed in the village of Gadar, where the women resided, though they quickly realized that something was wrong. The village was practically deserted, and when they asked one of the few remaining locals where everyone was, they were told that most villagers had left the area due to the seasonal weather, including the women they were looking for, who lived spread out and even higher into the mountains. And to find just 2 of them would require a grueling 4-hour hike. It was certainly suspicious to some degree, but nevertheless, the team proceeded on that long walk until they happened upon the first woman, Amina. The woman before them appeared to have the same facial features, and was even wearing the same exact outfit that Amina wore in the video. On top of this, the other locals they spoke with would go on to confirm that she was the Amina they were looking for, though proving this for certain was impossible, as the only information the investigators had to go off of was her name and screenshots from this recording, and so all they could do was document their findings and go on to meet the next girl, Shaheen. Shaheen's story is different from the others, as she was never actually shown in the footage. Rather, she was Amina's sister, whom Afzal claimed helped facilitate the illegal gathering that fateful night, and was therefore killed alongside the others for her involvement, with the most disturbing part being the fact that she was just 12 years old. But that was Afzal's story, and here, standing before the investigators, was a girl who appeared to be the same age, claiming to be Shaheen, as did her parents and all the other villagers they spoke with. Though given that her face never even appeared in the video, it was also impossible to verify this. After meeting Shaheen, the group was informed that the remaining women lived even further away, and reaching them before sundown wouldn't be possible, forcing the team to return to Abbottabad, having only met 2 of the girls. But so far, their findings were extremely promising.
Oh, maybe he did lie.
Less than 2 weeks later, on June 16th, the team would once again visit Kohistan, this time armed with cameras to document their findings. There, they would meet 2 more of the women, Serene John and Begum John. Much like the first 2 women, Serene John seemed to be a match, with her family and neighbors attesting to her identity, though it was noted that she was incredibly nervous and refused to speak unless her parents allowed her to, which was true also for Begum John, whose meeting was actually captured on camera.
कोई बात नहीं है सही है आपके पास हंसाने का हमारे पास नहीं.
But he did say that he just going based off.
It was evident how nervous she was. She could hardly even force a smile and didn't speak a single word. But despite this, everyone reassured the investigators that this was Begum John, and given how isolated the lives of Kohistani women are, perhaps her nerves were understandable. This left only the 5th alleged victim, Baziga, though she was nowhere to be seen that day, as she had supposedly fallen ill and was unable to come down from her home, which was even more remote than the team had gone thus far. But for the investigators, they had already all but confirmed that 4 of the women who Afzal claimed to have been murdered were still very much alive, with there being no evidence whatsoever that any executions had taken place, leaving the team with no real reason to believe any of his story. And so, days after their second trip to Kohistan, the news would break.
Human rights activist Farzana Bari, who was accompanying the team sent to bring the Kohistani girls to the Supreme Court, says there is evidence that all the girls are alive.
The Kohistan video case was closed. It was a swift end to such an alarming story, as after just a few weeks, in the eyes of the public and the government, the stories told about this video were deemed to be lies, and Afzal was the liar.
Wow.
But not everyone was so quick to agree with this conclusion. There were obvious flaws in this fact-finding mission, the most glaring of which being that all the investigators had to go off of were blurry screenshots and some names. In fact, Dr. Farzana Bari, one of the investigators sent to Kohistan who actually met with these women, would later go on to publicly state that she was unsatisfied with their findings. As though the women they met looked similar to those in the video, they weren't able to conclusively prove that they were who they claimed to be, just given the resources available to them. But if these weren't the women in question, then who were they? Why were they pretending to be them? And why was the entire village lying about it? Well, this spread the conspiracy theory that the women the investigators met with were merely actors, coerced into pretending to be these women as part of a cover-up to disprove Afzal's story, a cover-up that had to be so massive that the entire village was in on it.
What you think about that theory, my guy? You think that's a...
I think that's possible.
Yeah, most definitely, because that motherfucker lying. We all know that. We just
of course.
We just gotta figure out the whole story of why he lying and why all that other shit is happening.
It was unlikely, but there was a vocal minority in
they could be covering it up. Yeah.
Pakistan that truly believed this, including Afzal himself, as in his mind he was certain that those women had been killed and that he and his brothers were next. And so, with a small group of supporters by his side, Afzal vowed to continue his push for justice. And at the start of 2013, he would go to the courtroom in Abbottabad and file a motion to have the Kohistan video case reopened, a decision that had sudden and direct consequences. Days after Afzal's court filing, he received a devastating phone call that his brothers had been gunned down and murdered in cold blood.
What?
But not the ones you might expect. Afzal was one of 6 siblings, and at this point, 2 of his brothers were still in hiding, living their lives in a secret location. But the other 3, Sherwali, Shah Faisal, and Rafuddin, were living their lives as usual, believing that they were safe as they had no involvement in this fight whatsoever, though they were sadly mistaken. And on January 4th, 2013, while walking to their local mosque in Kohistan, all 3 were ambushed by a group of gunmen and met with a barrage of gunfire. Seconds later, all 3 were dead.
Damn.
The murders were shocking, and made even more so when the culprits were revealed as members of the slain woman's family, as well as the jirga that had called for their execution. And their motive was simple. This was revenge against Afzal for sharing his story, and for filing that application just days prior. And as if the group's message wasn't clear enough, they would then surround Afzal's home and fire over 1,000 bullets into the structure.
Damn.
Luckily, Afzal had already moved to a secret location out of fear of this very moment, but the incident left him forever shaken and forever devastated. As in trying to save 2 of his brothers, his fight had now cost him 3. But there was at least one minuscule silver lining, with that being that the jirga and the woman's family had now proven themselves to be murderous. But this didn't necessarily prove that they were actually the ones who killed these women. That was still just a theory, and a far-out theory at that. I mean, in the eyes of the Pakistan government, these women couldn't have been killed, as their investigators had literally met face-to-face with 4 of them. This was the main challenge that Reuters journalist Catherine Harold ran into after picking up the case. She had been reporting on Pakistani honor killings around the time of Afzal's press conference, and found his story to be believable based on her research into treatment of women in that region. But for his story to be true, then she knew that meant that the women presented to the investigative team couldn't have been who they claimed to be. And so she took an image of Begum John, the woman who looked particularly nervous during the investigation, and Begum's official government ID photo, and sent them both off to Digital Barriers, a company specializing in facial recognition technology, and asked them to compare the images and determine if these 2 women were actually the same person.
Do you think they look like the same person, my guy?
Shit, hell no.
No, they do not, bro. Like, I don't know.
Shit,
What
you could have paid me money to do it.
What do you think looks different? Like
her nose, her whole fucking face.
Yeah. Oh no, it could be the lighting too, man. Like,
nah, my boy, come on, man.
Yeah, you're right.
The comparison came back at just 17%, or in other words, they weren't a match. This means that by all likelihood, this woman, the woman shown to the government as proof that Begum John was alive, and who the entire village identified as Begum John, was in fact an imposter. It's a revelation that shifted the entire case. Suddenly, this once far-off conspiracy theory was proven to be at least partially true. And if someone had been impersonating Begum John, then it was more than possible that the same had been done with all the other women. And just like that, the Kohistan video conspiracy was in full effect. The government of Pakistan, however, wasn't convinced by the findings. In their minds, they had already investigated these claims, and they had little interest in reopening the case. But Afzal persisted, and he continued doing anything he could to get this case a wider audience, and force the government to reinvestigate. He did interviews on TV, filed motions in court, and even ran for office in Kohistan. But no matter how hard he tried, hardly any progress was made, until eventually years began to pass. The agony of waiting was hell for Afzal. Despite some of the women's family members being thrown in prison for the murder of his brothers, many were still walking free, and as were all the members of that original jirga, meaning that every day represented new risks to Afzal's life, new risks to his brothers' lives, and new risks to the lives of the women in Kohistan. Since the alleged executions of those 5 women, Afzal and his supporters had discovered evidence of over 50 other honor killings that had taken place in that small village over the course of just 2 years.
Damn.
A shockingly high number of people considering how few people actually lived in that village, with these honor killings being described as common as the common cold. Every household was being affected by them, but no one dared speak about it. They were all too afraid. The jirga held all the power, and speaking out against them would be breaching the tradition that they hold so dearly. And as a result, despite all the other killings, Afzal was still really the only one from the region that had been talking with the press. And this was finally about to pay off. In 2016, Afzal was featured on a Vice documentary that highlighted his story as well as the treatment of women in Kohistan at the hands of this bloodthirsty jirga.
मैंने वो अपने भाई की इंतकाम लेने के लिए आज तक मैंने हर किस्म की कोशिश करने की पोजीशन में नहीं हूँ, लेकिन मैं कहता हूँ कि उन लोगों को कुछ न कुछ सज़ा मिल जाए, नस्लों को इस तरह की कोई तकलीफ न पहुँचे.
It was an extremely compelling video, showing us just how much Afzal's life had been derailed by the whole situation, as he was forced to live alone in hiding, separate from his family, including his children, wife, and 2 surviving brothers, who themselves were also living in hiding, in conditions that they described as being miserable. The story was about as harrowing as it gets, and as soon as the video released, hundreds of thousands of people would watch it, thrusting the Kohistan video case into a worldwide spotlight. And with so many eyes now on the case, and with so many people now calling for the Pakistan government to reinvestigate, they would finally relent. That same year, in November of 2016, the government called on that jirga once more to bring these women to Abbottabad and show them in their courtroom so they could personally verify that they were still alive. And this time, they outright demanded it. Failure to comply would essentially be seen as an admission to these murders. There was no getting around it this time, and so that month, a group of 5 women and their families were all brought down from Kohistan, and one by one led into the courtroom with the hope of bringing this case to an end, once and for all.
Okay.
Your family, he is dedicated.
To protect the women's honor, no photos or videos were allowed in the courtroom, meaning all we know about what happened inside comes from officials' descriptions afterwards. The first thing noted was the conduct of these women. The girls produced were observed to be extremely nervous and frightened. They were hardly able to respond to queries. They had incompatible reflexes and face expressions. In response to most of the queries, it was commonly observed that they were supplied with words from elders, especially about their ages and husbands. The girls were terrified, too terrified to speak for themselves, and instead all their answers were fed to them by accompanying elders. But the strangeness of their mannerisms pales in comparison to the strangeness of their appearances, with the most bizarre being Amina. By appearance, she was about 15 years old. Reportedly, the video was shot back in the year 2010, and it surfaced on the internet in 2012. If we subtract 6 years from Amina's age, her age at the time of the video shooting would be between 8 years or 9 years, whereas the women visible in the video looked to be aged between 20 years or 22 years, back in the year 2010.
Yeah.
The girl that they brought to court claiming to be Amina was just a child, and based on her appearance, she would have been as young as 8 years old in the video. Which clearly isn't the case. I mean, these are fully grown women.
Yeah.
And the same was true for Serene John. By appearance, she was not more than 16 years or 17 years of age, meaning she would have been aged 9 years or 10 years in 2010. Along with this, neither she nor her father was able to tell her birthday or her age. These girls were clearly not the women from the video. They were just acting. And while these seemed to be feeble attempts, there were other aspects that made it obvious just how desperate this jirga was to try and pass these girls off as real, with the most upsetting coming from the girl who claimed to be Amina. Now, Amina actually had her fingerprints on file with the Pakistani government already, and so naturally they went to collect this girl's fingerprints in order to compare them. But when they attempted to do so, they came back blank, which is when the officials noticed that the tips of her fingers had been burnt off.
What?
And it wasn't just her thumbs. Every single finger had the tips of them scorched off.
What?
On the spot, all 5 girls brought into that courtroom were determined to be imposters, victims themselves who were forced into pretending that they were the women seen in this footage. And considering the jirga's desperation and the lengths they went through to now twice try and pass off different women as those from the video, it was clear that something awful had happened to the actual women, something that they didn't want to ever get out. And with that, almost universally, the world fell into agreement that Afzal had been telling the truth all along. But any celebration from Afzal would have been short-lived. Months later, a fire erupted in a small home in Gadar, the village where all of the women once resided. And inside that home, 2 women and 3 children were trapped and would tragically burn to death.
Damn.
It was an awful tragedy, but according to the local jirga, it wasn't an accident. As in its aftermath, they alleged that Afzal was the one responsible, claiming that he had started the fire in retaliation. This claim was complete hearsay, and there was no evidence whatsoever linking Afzal to the blaze. In fact, he wasn't living anywhere near the area at the time, but nevertheless, Afzal would be arrested for the murders of 5 people.
What?
It's a gut-wrenching development, and follows the trend of horrible misfortunes that Afzal suffered in trying to blow the whistle on this crime. But as his sentence commenced, the Kohistan video case continued making its way through the legal system, until July of 2018, when the news came in. It was officially determined that Serene John, Begum John, and Baziga had all in fact been tortured and murdered by their families on order from the jirga, with the confirmation coming as a result of confessions made from their own family members. And the entire time, the village had been working together to conceal the truth in what was described as a massive, coordinated conspiracy to cover up their crimes. Now, bizarrely, this revelation stated that the other 2 girls were actually still alive, as they weren't mentioned in any of the confessions. However, given what unfolded in court, this is universally doubted to this day, as most are in agreement that every woman shown in this video was in fact murdered 2 years after its recording, just as Afzal had claimed. It's unlike any story I can remember hearing. One video, one wholesome, lighthearted video for that matter, is responsible for 8 murders, as not only were these 5 women killed because of it, but Afzal's 3 brothers were killed as a result of him sharing it with the world, making it perhaps the deadliest video I've ever come across. But as suggested earlier, this footage isn't considered responsible for the deaths of 8 people. It's considered responsible for the deaths of 9. The confessions in 2018 didn't lead to any immediate convictions, but it was at least proof in the eyes of the public that these murders took place. And this was followed by Afzal finally being released from prison in early 2019, a full year and a half after he was unjustly arrested. But despite being free, Afzal was hardly out of the woods. The case wasn't officially over yet, and he knew that the family and the members of the Jirga were still out there. In fact, around the same time, the family members who were initially convicted of killing Afzal's brothers were mysteriously released, for reasons that weren't specified, and they were likely now more angry than ever. And so after being released from prison, Afzal went to a local police station to request police protection, something that the court had already granted him. But in response, the officers said no. And when he tried pressing the matter, Afzal claims that the officers became so enraged that they dragged him inside a small room and beat him. Between Afzal being arrested and now this, it almost felt as though the government and the police were now against him, which could be due to the fact that Afzal had been very public with how inadequate and downright abusive the police had been towards him. And with nowhere left to turn, Afzal would post a video to his social media declaring that his life was in danger.
और मैं 2012 से यही पुलिस की जिद में जलील हो रहा हूँ। एक जवान था, उसने ऐसी हालत मेरी की है कि और बहुत सबसे उठ के मुझे मारा है उसने। जिसके साथ करे मेरे खिलाफ करे या किसी और के खिलाफ करे, मैं इस नाइंसाफी के खिलाफ चाहे मेरे खिलाफ कुछ भी करे।
Days later, on March 6th, 2019, Afzal arrived in Abbottabad to testify in the Kohistan trial, though he never made it into the courtroom. As he sat in the back of an unmarked truck waiting to enter, suddenly, the vehicle was struck by multiple bullets. Paramedics would open the door minutes later, only to find Afzal laying in a pool of blood. He would never make it to the hospital.
In Pakistan, the man who led a campaign to expose one of the country's most notorious so-called honor killings has been shot dead in the city of Abbottabad.
Afzal's death was devastating to so many, not only throughout Pakistan, but throughout the entire world. His relentless pursuit of justice, and his willingness to sacrifice his own life in order to expose these crimes, was something that was championed by so many throughout the world. And he had come so close to seeing justice served, as only a few months later, 3 men were arrested and sentenced to life in prison for the Kohistan murders, each being members of the girls' families. Along with one other, a man named Masoom Khan, a member of the Jirga who was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Afzal. But even with this, people were angry. They were angry with the government for not taking Afzal's word more seriously. They were angry with the police who failed to protect Afzal and seemed to be actively working against him. And they were also angry at a rather unexpected source. The Vice documentary made back in 2016 was undoubtedly part of what put this case back on the map and back in the court system, but right from its release, it garnered criticism for something that the showrunners had seemingly overlooked, with one commenter pointing it out. Wait, hold on a minute. Isn't it dangerous to expose his whereabouts like this? In the footage used, the crew seemingly showed the outside of the hideout where Afzal had been living, as well as where his family had been hiding, and in response to Afzal's death, many were quick to blame the documentary. You people had literally shot his location and his family's location. Damn, you killed him. By disclosing his hideout, Afzal Kohistani was killed by his enemies. This is really shameful and against the ethics of journalism. Why would you show Afzal and his family's hiding place? And while it may seem a little extreme to blame a documentary made 3 years before his murder, it's given a bit more weight by the fact that Vice had actually re-uploaded the documentary to their Vice Asia channel at the end of 2018, where it went completely viral, gaining more viewership than even the original upload. Months later, Afzal would be killed, and to this day, many still believe that Vice played an unintentional role in it. But again, this is just public speculation, and at the end of the day, it was really on the police and the government of Pakistan to protect him, and they failed. It's a heartbreaking end to a heartbreaking story, and follows this trend of misfortune that Afzal dealt with throughout his life. And unfortunately, that trend continued even after his death. Devastatingly, the 3 men arrested for the murders of these women would be unexpectedly released from prison in 2023, only 4 short years after their initial arrest. A far cry from life in prison, like they were originally sentenced to. And the reason for their release was just as upsetting, as the government cited a lack of evidence. These 3 men literally confessed to the killings, and they even discussed how they disposed of the bodies afterwards. And yet there suddenly wasn't enough evidence to keep them in prison, despite them already being convicted. Meaning that after all of the death in this video, the murders of Afzal's brothers, the murders of these 5 women, and the murder of Afzal himself, only 1 man is currently in prison.
Oh, for sure.
Bro, that's crazy. What?
Wow.
That's crazy, bro.
That's crazy.
What'd you think about that, man?
That was a crazy video. I feel for bro. That's sad, bro.
Yeah, man, most definitely, man.
Man, sheesh, man. Wow, that was a interesting video.
What did we learn from that, my guy?
We learned that we're grateful to be in America. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
Yeah, grateful to be in America. Shit, I'm happy I don't have to deal with nothing like that.
Yeah.
And I feel for the people over there that have to deal with that. So, shout out to y'all.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah, that is crazy. Well, guys, that was freaking crazy. Shout out to Azaria1_ for keeping that chat alive, man. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Azaria, I hope you enjoyed this video. Y'all seen a lot of wow, and that's crazy. Because that was absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
Shout out to my boy Dalton for bringing up the video. Make sure y'all go check out my boy.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm still in awe.
Yeah.
But with that being said, guys, peace. Yeah, I'm shocked too. Peace. Love, peace, and hair grease.
Yes, sir. Well, yeah, as my boy said, man, I'm so shocked too, man. That shit crazy, bro. Bro, it just goes to show you, man, there's some shit that be going on that you don't be knowing about, man. That don't be getting enough noise. That should. So yeah. Shout out to KJ for joining with me on this reaction.
Sir.
You feel me? Yeah, we could definitely do something like this again sometime.
For sure.
That shit was crazy.
I was crazy.
Yeah. So, thank you everyone who tuned in the stream. Thank you everyone who tunes in after. I appreciate single one of y'all. Because I will be doing this shit right here. It wasn't for all of y'all. Because it's about us at the end of the day. That being said. Hold up. Let me fix my shit. Catch y'all in the next stream.